The veiled screen, uncanny crystallizations in the moving image. In this dissertation, I theorize how thinking can be generated through the act of film spectatorship. I explore instances in which cinema reflects the thoughts of those who place themselves in its presence by generating uncanny self-reflexivity. Even though its primary focus is cinema, this dissertation initiates a broader theory about the role of art in shaping the mind, not by limiting it to the confined worldview delineated by an artist, but by opening up potentialities of thought that can liberate it precisely from the limits of the frame, the page, or the screen. Referencing how Parrhasius' painted veil deceived Zeuxis into believing it concealed something underneath, as described by Pliny in Naturalis Historia, I propose we view cinematic artifice as a veiled screen that draws viewers to believe in celluloid's lifelike illusions not as reality, but as a reflection of that which lies hidden within their own minds. A simulated encounter with thoughts yet unformed or buried deep within our subconscious that we recognize as our own, as if one were looking at one's own reflection in a mirror. The merging of two seemingly antithetical theoretical interventions in film studies, Freudian psychoanalysis, and Gilles Deleuze's philosophy of film, lies at the heart of this dissertation. Hence the term uncanny crystallization in its title, a theoretical imbrication of Freud's 1919 essay on the uncanny, with Deleuze's crystals of time from cinema to the time image. An uncanny crystallization describes a spectatorial encounter with something recognizable yet foreign in the reflective spectrality of time simulated by the moving image. It is the moment our thoughts encounter their double within film. The 7 chapters contained within build a theory on how cinema, and by extension other forms of art such as painting and literature, can simulate a double to our mental processes by depicting a veiled diegesis that appears to hide an extra diegetic reality that remains unseen by the spectator. The films I have chosen to discuss in this project all possess such a metareferential construction of occlusion. They are veiled screens built to inspire in the viewer a desire to unveil a curtain that ultimately hides nothing other than a reflection of their own thoughts, which are thus synthesized in the uncanny engagement with the artwork as if they were caught in a self-reflexive crystal circuit with the images. Chapter 1. The Confined Spectator. Stripped minds in hermetic spaces. Like Luis Buñuel and Salvador Dali's use of space and objects as the triggers of a rational desire in its characters to represent the impulses that lie beneath the facade of a usually constructed civility, Chapter 1 argues that Carlos Saura's use of claustrophobic space in La Madriguera goes beyond a reading of the film as mere political allegory and suggests rather an unveiling of the process of mental confinement embedded in the mechanisms of censorship through a juxtaposition of the conditions of film spectatorship with the unquestioned agoraphobia of the film's protagonists. In the film, the cinematic articulates a process of abstraction in which time, chronos, as well as any notion of chronology itself, must yield to the unruly redistribution of anachronic matter within the domestic space, of objects that dissolved chronology through their very appearance. The house, that domestic yet rigid and massive gray edifice, comes across the screen as something beyond allegory, in which typically the figuration of political circumstances occurs strictly through characters. This anti-chronology edifice creates a certain kind of subject through a performative conditioning that is the very condition of inhabiting such a space. Chapter 2. The Blinded Spectator. The Defiance of Reconstituted Sight. Through a threaded discussion of 4 key films released as Spain transitions out of dictatorship in the 1970s and settles into democracy in the 1980s and 1990s, this chapter attempts to elucidate how visual echoes of Ancien Andalus' infamous eye slashing reoccur in scenes of self-reflexive horror that compel viewers to identify with the film's female protagonists as they defy that which was censored from their field of vision, as well as their own self-imposed blindness in order to overcome the crippling effects of a potentially traumatic experience.
Ana. 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 ¿Se puede saber qué estás pensando?
What are you looking at? I want your eyes too. Like all the others!
¿Qué ha pasado?
Ha cortado el plano. Míralo otra vez.
Ha cortado un trozo.
Y no solo aquí. La película entera está llena de cortes. Todos del mismo estilo. Pero fíjate, el cambio es mínimo. Él está casi en la misma posición.
Entonces, ¿por qué corta?
Corta lo que no quiere que veamos.
Su nombre.
Su nombre. Vanessa sabía quién era, lo conocía.
Lucrecia Martel's La Mujer Sin Cabeza is a film that resorts to visual omission in order to force the spectator into reconstituting the horrors potentially perpetrated by the titular female protagonist. The film is enacting the violence present in the not looking, the not acknowledging by precisely doing that, cutting off the frame just on the edge of the horrific, excising scenes with potentially incriminating evidence. Through visual occlusion, the film encourages the viewer to imagine the potential horrors hidden underneath Martel's veiled screen. Just like the censored Frankenstein piqued the curiosity of the spirit of the Beehive's Anna, and the cuts applied to Vanessa's snubbed videotape enticed Angela's reticent attraction to violence. Chapter 3: The Conscious Spectator, an intermedial contemplation of Las Meninas. Much like Maria's drowning in the Spanish-dubbed Frankenstein, the killer's name in Thesis' snubbed videotape, and the hit-and-run accident in La Mujer Sin Cabeza, what is left out of Diego Velázquez's Baroque opus Las Meninas is the painting itself. In Las Meninas, the spectator never sees the completed canvas. He or she is not allowed to see either the representation being painted or the reality of that which is being represented, being only a witness to the process through which one becomes the other. Velázquez invokes the power of art to alter consciousness, as the painting evokes not only our curiosity but also our capacity to mentally represent in our imagination that which exceeds the limits of the canvas. Anticipating elements of modern cinema, Las Meninas functions as a transplant of Velázquez's consciousness onto the spectator, a prosthesis that generates an arresting feeling of self-awareness that is self-evidently the proof of how art engages us neurobiologically by mirroring how the brain synthesizes two focal points in 3D perception. It is as if our brain were a mirror to the artist's brain when conceiving the perspectival work of art, which in turn depicts how the spectator's brain will engage with the artwork. Like Las Meninas, cinema also functions as a dual-sided mirror in which a thought bounces in recursive reflection as if the screen generated it with us, for us, as if by us. Chapter 4: The Spectral Spectator, the Visor Effect in Film. The fourth chapter engages in an intermediate reading of the visor effect, a key concept in Jacques Derrida's Spectres of Marx, to theorize film spectatorship as a simulation of temporal dislocation and spectral ubiquity. It theorizes the presence of the spectator as an invisible specter looking through a raised visor, not of an anachronistic armor, but of the lens of a camera onto a fictional vision of another time, perhaps a representation of the past, or that of an imagined future, or, in Shakespearean terms, a time out of joint.
We've met before, haven't we?
Where was it you think we met?
At your house, don't you remember?
Are you sure?
As a matter of fact, I'm there right now. Call me. I told you I was here. Give me back my phone.
He tenido un fin de semana espantoso. Pero no hemos ensayado para que pudieras descansar. ¿Descansar? He tenido al hijo de puta ese encima las 48 horas. No me ha dado ni un segundo de respiro. El muy cabrón. Mejor que no te lo imagines.
Hi.
Oh, my sweet Maxine. My darling.
I love you, Lottie. Oh.
Chapter 5. The Crystallized Spectator. The Spectator's Double in the Cinematic Abyss. The fifth chapter discusses Freud's The Uncanny in conjunction with Delisle's varying crystals from the time image to build the idea that the film screen is an abyss from which the spectator's thoughts are uncannily duplicated. It illustrates varying instances in which duality emerges within the diegesis to reflect the uncanny doubling of the spectator's mental predicament as what is projected visually on the screen. The collapsing of realities in this sequence, in which a film within the film reflexively implicates the spectator, in a doubling of how it also implicates Mark, the spectator's double within the film, himself a double to the implied spectator of Heinrich's 8mm films, create what I call a cinematic abyss, in which mirroring realities facing each other in eternal duplication yield a terrifying void, an absence reminiscent of the essential void generated by Las Meninas as described by Foucault in The Order of Things.
Well, that's why I'm with you. Because you say I for me. Because you say I for me.
Madrigal's redeployment of Vertigo's audiovisual imagery is an example of a reconfiguration of oral and visual cues reinterpreted in a new narrative to communicate through uncanny crystallization the unthought in the Cuban spectator. Conscious and spectral, the spectator engages with doubles within the diegesis, unseen, to face his or her own duplicated thoughts in a mirror that crystallizes a forgery of what he or she has yet to think, as he or she sees time form in the illusory depth of a painted screen. Chapter 6. The Self-Reflexive Spectator, the Quixotic in Horror. This chapter proposes that Miguel de Cervantes' exercise of mocking yet elevating a popular form of lowbrow fiction with perspicacity is uncannily mirrored in a string of metafictional films released during the 1990s that produced a revival of the slasher horror genre by cleverly mocking and revitalizing its conventions. At the end of Chapter 8 in Part 1, as Don Quixote is about to crack open his Vasque opponent with his sword, the author-narrator runs out of source material to continue his history. In the following chapter, we learn how he stumbled upon a manuscript written in Arabic by Moorish historian Cide Hamete Benengeli in a market in Alcalá de Toledo, that allows him to resume the battle's climactic moment upon its translation. In Wes Craven's film, the appearance of the script acts as a similarly conscious disruption of the illusion of cinema as real life, as well as revealing real life to be an illusion akin to cinema.
The more she read, the more she realized what she had in her hands was nothing more or less than her life itself. That everything she had experienced and thought was bound within these pages. There was no movie. There was only her life.
By pointing the mirror at the audience and involving the reader or viewer in the creation of itself, the text or movie sequel creates an idea of what it is to reinvent yourself into a larger version of yourself that is more famous and more successful, stronger.
We've been through this before. You know what I think about your potential as an actress.
Gus, I don't think I can do it.
You're a fighter, Sid. That's why you're here. That's why this is your major.
Yeah, I'm a fighter.
I didn't hear that.
I'm a fighter.
I don't believe you. I don't.
I'm a fighter.
Chapter 7. The Delusional Spectator. Metafilm as Virtual Oniric Simulation. Upon entering the narrative abyss inside his own mind in the cave of Montesinos, facing the uncomfortable possibility that all that he sees is but a dream, Don Quixote passes through an unmasking of his deluded senses, liberated from the enchanted delusions by which he abides, and begins to see a glitch in the chivalric simulacra.
Pero ¿qué pasaría si te dijera que estás soñando? Mira esta gente. Parece que están hablando de sus cosas. ¿A que sí? Completamente ajenos a ti. Sin embargo, podrían estar allí porque tú lo has querido. Es más, podrías hacer que se pusieran a tu servicio o al contrario, que te destruyeran.
Lo que quiero es que se callen. Y usted también.
Abre los Ojos in its entirety is a veil, a virtual dream draped over reality that is also painted, since it is a film aware of its artificiality through that very construction of itself as a fabricated virtual environment, a veiled screen. Since the dream reflects our desire to unmask its material illusion and hence be released from its grip, just as Don Quixote's dream inside the cave shows an unconscious desire to see things for what they are, cinema, when viewed primarily as a subconscious relationship to the mechanisms that construct the projection instead of a conscious decoding of the depicted narrative, ultimately functions on the wish to exit the cave, the dark room of the movie theater, and instead experience not the imagined conditions of existence but those conditions in the flesh.
Existence is paused!
So how does it feel?
What?
Your real life.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure here, where we are, is real at all.
I wonder if what Abre los Ojos and Existence are hinting at with their meta-dreams and meta-games is an epistemic shift in which the virtual has replaced the physical as the locus of existence. One might even call it a quixotic episteme. Just as Velázquez's meta-painting Las Meninas signals a shift from resemblance to representation, that in turn augurs the advent of cinema, Cervantes' Don Quixote perhaps prefigures the episteme of the virtual and its protagonist's ingenious madness that insists in replacing reality with delusion. Conclusion: the screen unveiled. If we imbricate the veils of self-reflection depicted in Don Quixote, Las Meninas, and the films discussed throughout this dissertation, an intermedial discourse between text, painting, and moving images emerges in which art's representative language, whether it be word, brushstrokes, or celluloid, forges an uncanny mirror to the thoughts of its readers and spectators. Through these uncanny crystallizations of potential thoughts projected onto the spectator as he falls into the abyss of cinema's forced illusions in order to willingly confound what he sees with what he thinks as he sees, the meta-cinema of the veiled screen proposed in this dissertation seeks to unveil its deliberate deceit not of our senses of sight and sound, but of our brain's ability to potentially assimilate external images as internal thought. It is a testament to the power of cinema to mirror the mind by thinking with us, for us, as it by us.